Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Your hosts are Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins. Don Mazzella is the editor-in-chief of the Small Business Digest. Dan Perkins is a registered investment advisor with 43 years' experience in managing money.
Dan Perkins here, your co-host, along with Don Mazzella of Recalculating for Small Business. Our radio program is dedicated to you, helping the small business owners increase their profits. We draw our name from Recalculating, voted the best small business book of 2017 by the Independent Press. In this book, it features ways to grow your small business. Now, here's Don Mazzella.
Nationwide, there are more than 8,500 farmer markets where small business owners selling their creations and testing out new products really learn the business. To tell us more about this and Intense, a fascinating conference I never knew existed until just recently, is Catt Feels White. Catt, if I may call you that, C-A-T-T, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Catt, tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and the farmers markets, and where people can get more information.
San Diego markets, and we work with business improvement districts throughout San Diego to develop and manage farmers markets. California has a terrific direct marketing law that lets farmers sell directly to the public. They're joined by a variety of food makers and some local artisans as well to create grocery stores in the street. I've been doing this since 2008. Before that, I was a restaurant owner. I had a marketing company that only had restaurants for clients. I had a construction company that only built restaurants. So you can kind of see there's a theme there. I'm a serial entrepreneur that's always dealt with food. And as I got more and more into the independent restaurant business, I had a trade magazine for small restaurants. I found that sourcing was really important and got to know a lot of the farmers and artisan food makers in both Phoenix and San Diego. So taking on the farmers market in Little Italy, where I lived at the time, was a natural. I could do anything there without getting in my car except shop for groceries. And so we created a market where farmers could bring fresh food and coffee roasters could bring that and bakers could bring breads. And since then, since 2008, it's expanded to a 5-block-long market that brings 25,000 people to the street in Little Italy and San Diego every Saturday. And we've opened a couple more markets, one in North Park, one in Pacific Beach. Altogether, there are 45 farmers markets in San Diego County managed by various groups.
Well, you manage some of them, but not all of them. But how do you manage a farmers market, and how do you enforce any, if there are any, hygiene laws?
There are so many laws that govern farmers markets. We actually joke around our office that we could manage nuclear plants with less regulatory oversight than we have at farmers markets. So we're subject to the USDA, to California's version of the USDA.
How do you manage a facility? Do you get to rent the street, set up the stalls? What are some of the details before I turn it over to Dan?
So it's a fairly expansive process. We joke that we answer to more regulatory agencies than we would if we were running a nuclear power plant here at farmers markets. And depending on the city, things are different. But in San Diego, we get a permit from the city to close off a certain area of streets. In Little Italy, for instance, it's 5 blocks. In some of the other cities, it's maybe a block or 2, or some of the other locations. And then we carefully take applications from farmers and food makers. We do sampling to make sure that their products are up to the quality that our shoppers are going to want. We're really curating the offerings at each market. There's a whole lot of regulations in California around certified farmers markets.
Catt, thank you for joining us. I am a farmers market shopper when I can get in. I live on Sanibel Island here in Southwest Florida, and we have a Sunday from 8 until 1 o'clock a farmer's market, and if you're not there by 8:05, you don't get a parking spot, and there's no way to get in. And they've moved it 3 times to bigger and bigger spaces, and it's still very difficult to get in. I think the people like the idea of fresh fruits and vegetables, and in the case of Sanibel, fresh seafood, and right from the ocean, and jams and jellies and breads and pastry and all kinds of stuff. But
exactly
I'm curious about whether, and I wanted to ask you a hypothetical question.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that I'm a small entrepreneur just starting out, and I've got a widget. And
what? A widget?
A widget. That's,
okay.
we're not trying to describe what it is. It's just something that I've invented. Can I go to a farmer's market and get space from you and try and sell my widget in your farmer's market, or does it have to be produce or foodstuffs?
So you're talking about a non-food item?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have, generally at our markets, we have a small amount of space devoted to non-food. In Little Italy, for instance, and I would suspect Sanibel, because you've probably got a pretty good tourist population, we do generally have a section of the market that offers more typically local crafts and arts than widgets per se, but I've had the occasional widgets. So we would be looking at, is this a good fit for the demographic that's coming to look for fresh fruits and vegetables? If it's a widget that improves gardening techniques or a widget related to cooking, absolutely a natural fit. If it's something outside of that, we'd look at that on a case-by-case basis and see if it's something that would do a good business given our demographic.
As the creator of the farmer's market, you said earlier in your discussion with Don, you get all the permits and you have to comply with all the regulations. You rent out the space. Is it a flat rate, or do you get a percentage of the gross sales from the merchant?
It depends on the market. At our markets, we charge a flat rate. At other markets in Southern California, there's typically a base, and then you've got a percentage of sales, and you're either paying base plus percentage or you're paying the base versus a percentage, whichever is higher. And that varies across the country.
Okay. What, in your decision-making process, why did you opt to go for just a flat rate?
At the most basic level, I opted for that because percentage markets make liars out of the nicest people, in my experience. So we have farmers and vendors at our markets that sell X amount of jams or breads or vegetables, and we know what they sell, especially on the farm side, because the agriculture department makes us collect that information. But they'll tell us, this is what I'm selling, but hey, if you talk to the manager over at X market, don't tell him I'm selling that much because he charges a percentage and I tell him a little bit less. And we see that happen often. It's like driving over the speed limit or, being extra careful about how many taxes you pay. People who are paying a percentage tend to be not always exactly up to the penny on what it is that they're selling.
So did I understand?
There's one more reason, actually. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Finish your thought.
Yeah, and the other reason for us is that some of the items that we encourage people to sell, imported cheese, for instance, or a really high grade of olive oil, don't have a ton of profit margin on them. So if you're charging percentage on gross sales, it's really difficult for people to bring in high-end products since what they keep on that may be no different than somebody selling carrots or jam. So in order to encourage those really high-quality products that may not have a lot of margin but that do have a pretty high retail price, we find that the flat rate works better.
So if I look at it from the standpoint of a flat rate situation, did I understand you to say that when you're dealing with produce, you have to report what is being sold?
Even at our markets with a flat rate, you do have to report what's being sold in terms of produce. The agriculture department wants to know that because it's part of their verification process to make sure that the farmers are selling only what they grow. If they've gone out and inspected and somebody's got 3 grapefruit trees, but their lists of sales add up over the course of the year to 4 tons of grapefruit, they're going to suspect that maybe they're picking up grapefruit somewhere else and adding that to their tables. And that's what they want to avoid. You're only supposed to be selling what you grow. So in that case, even though we're not charging a percentage, we do monitor sales.
So that the government has some influence. You have to report, I assume, on a timely basis what a particular vendor sold. But you're dependent on him or her telling you the truth of how much they sold.
That's correct. And with us, it's just on the agriculture side. So if you're selling jam or coffee bean or bread, we're not responsible for reporting that.
Okay. And do you find that there are people who are acquiring fruits and vegetables that are not grown on their land and selling them?
We do not find that in San Diego because we have an extremely proactive agriculture department. And so they've got a lot of inspectors in the fields, and they keep up on it really tightly. I have heard about, I've read articles and just anecdotally talking to other market managers in some other parts of the country and actually even some other parts of California where inspectors are not as proactive and the market manager themselves is not going out and checking farms like we do. I've heard of those things being discovered, yes, every once in a while.
How do you respond to a question that some people, not saying you, but some people in the farmers market business represent that the quality of their produce is better than what you can buy in the store?
I personally believe that if you're buying produce that's coming directly from the farmer to their table where you're buying it, that produce is better quality just by the nature of it being so much fresher. Very few grocery store operations can bring in produce the same day that it's sold. It's just not the way they're set up. They bring it in, they store it, they have it in refrigerated storage, they've got it in brokerage trucks that then distribute it throughout the city. They're not typically buying from the farmer that day and selling it to the customer the same day. So in that way, yes, right. I absolutely think it's better quality.
So how yours is on Saturday. How many blocks did you say that was it 8 blocks?
My Saturday market is 5 blocks long. I also have a Tuesday market that's 2 blocks long and a Thursday market that's just expanded into its 3rd block this year.
So, and you said you got 25,000 on the Saturday market?
25,000 shoppers. Uh-huh.
Yeah. That must be
that's
huge.
The largest market in San Diego County.
That's a lot of people. So do the farmers... I would say with that many people, I would assume that many of the farmers sell out.
Yes, some of the farmers sell out. We certainly encourage people to have enough produce with them to make it into the 2 o'clock closing time for those shoppers that can't get there until after they pick up the kids from soccer and head over. So over time, they gauge how much they've got. We've got some organizations that pick up produce that can't be packed up to be sold at a Sunday market, but mostly at a Saturday market, they're bringing a little bit more than they expect to sell so that they can pack up what's left and take it to a market on Sunday.
So is this their primary outlet for selling their produce?
Depends on the farmer. Some farmers that are very large, some of the larger farmers in our county do a tremendous business at the farmers market, but they also be selling some to produce services that distribute to restaurants. Those are probably the 2 ways they do. We've got some big avocado and citrus farmers that bring some of their produce to the farmers market and then sell some to packing houses that would then sell to brokers that would take it to grocery stores. We say buying local is good, but what's really financially advantageous for farmers and food makers is when you buy direct. Because if the farmers are selling it to a packing house, who's selling it to a broker, who's selling it to a distributor, who's selling it to grocery stores, and then it gets to the consumers, each of those folks along the way has to make a little bit of money. So when you're buying direct from the farmer, they keep it all. They don't have that split where they're getting 16 or 17 cents on the dollar.
Dave, can I jump in?
Yes, sure. Go right ahead, Don.
I just, well, why don't you finish that question? I wanted to go on to intents.
Finish
your thought.
I just wanted to, sure, thank you. I was just curious about, in the case of, you said large farmers, you have, I assume, since you have to watch what they sell in terms of quantity, I assume that there are some farmers who, this is the principal place that they distribute much of their produce.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of farmers that only sell through farmers markets because they found it so much more financially advantageous and it helps them stay on top of things. If they don't have a huge amount of produce that they've got to get out every week, farmers markets are definitely the way to go because they make more on it. They keep more of their income.
Right. And just as a quick follow-up, In our markets here, our market here on Sanibel, they, as I said earlier, they sell fresh fish, but they also sell meat and poultry. Do you do that at your markets?
We do. Are they raising meat and poultry on Sanibel?
No.
Yeah, so we do sell poultry and meat at our markets, but it's from poultry farmers and local ranchers. And when I say local in California, certified markets mean that all of the producers are from California. So the really big meat, we've got a couple of guys here doing that, but we just don't have the land area that they do up in the Central Valley. So we see some of our meat coming from farther north in California. We've got plenty of chicken farmers here. We've got folks that are raising rabbits. And we've got terrific fresh seafood as well, being here on San Diego Bay.
Okay, back to you, John.
Well, it's fascinating. I always love the way you get down the list of questions. But, Catt, I would love to talk now a little bit about Intense, I-N-T-E-N. Let me spell it out. Well, will you spell it out for your...
yeah, it's I-N-T-E-N-T-S, Intense. Get it? Tense. And our T-shirts say farmers markets are so intense because that's what those folks are doing, is selling intense.
And is there a website?
There is, intenseconference.com.
And well, tell us about that conference and what it's about and why people should go to it.
Well, it's definitely for people that are involved in the farmers market business or in any kind of special events business that would apply to a food maker that was selling at the county fair, for instance, or at food festivals, food and wine festivals. Anybody that's selling in a very small, kind of a micro business that's operating in a temporary space, so typically Intense. We started a class in 2010 because I had so many people that were calling me asking how to get into the farmer's market as somebody who was making baked goods or as a farmer or somebody that was roasting coffee. How did they set up? Because it's not as simple as pitching a tent. There's a lot of permits involved. There's insurance requirements. There's labeling requirements. And there's also a reasonable amount of money involved. It costs much less to launch a business at a farmer's market than it does creating your own brick-and-mortar business, but there's still some costs attached. It is a real business. It will give you enough income to support yourself, but it has to be treated like a real business. So we started this class back in 2010 for brand new farmers and vendors to teach them how to navigate the permits and the costs and the business plans to get started in markets. And what we found is a lot of folks would come back to us and say, oh, I wish you'd teach a whole class on social media, or I wish you'd teach a whole class on how to effectively buy packaging, since we were doing this one-day overview class. And we had farmers and vendors who were already in markets and had been operating for a few years that said, oh, I heard good things from this new guy that took your Vendor 101 class. I wish you'd teach us a little bit more about how to cost our recipes. So we've expanded it to a 3-day conference. It's terrifically popular here in San Diego, end of February. And the first day concentrates on startup farmers and vendors and teaches them, again, like we did at our Vendor 101 classes, how to get rolling, but not just in San Diego, anywhere across the country in the U.S. And then the second day is about, now that you've started, how do you manage your marketing efforts? How do you buy packaging more effectively? How do you make your passion create a little more profit? People get into it because they love what they're doing, but we want to make sure they're financially sustainable. And then the third day of the conference, we look at, you've created a successful business at the markets. How do you expand from there? Should you be doing some wholesale sales to restaurants? Should you consider a brick-and-mortar retail shop or a restaurant of your own? How do you expand the sources of income that you have?
So is this primarily for the people who create the marketplaces or for the participants of the marketplace?
We do have a strong track for farmers market managers, partly to teach them how to keep nurturing and encouraging their farmers and vendors. And then the very strongest tracks are for the farmers and the food makers that want to make their businesses more profitable and expand their businesses within and outside of markets.
Well, we had on one of our programs 2 women who started a farmer's market in Washington, D.C., and then ended up having a gourmet vegetarian restaurant that's all the rage in Washington.
Yeah, we see that too. We've got a guy that started out selling ceviche. He just opened his second restaurant here in San Diego. So we see a lot of folks that start at the markets, get their feet wet. It's kind of a rolling focus group as customers come through and can really talk to you face-to-face about your product and then expand from there.
So basically you have the farmers who bring their produce. You have people who create cookies or cupcakes or some dishes.
Hummus, barbecue sauce.
Mm-hmm. And what are two or three things that basic things that you tell people who wouldn't want to get involved in that?
Well, some of the things are, number one, you need to do even if you don't do a 10-page business plan, you need to do a down and dirty kind of feasibility study on your product and make sure that what you're spending to create the product is less than what you're going to be able to charge to people to buy the product. And a lot of people who are passionate about their barbecue sauce or their fudge don't necessarily have that business background. And so we need to take them into how much detail they need to have in that costing feasibility. Did they count the package and the lid to the package that they're going to put it in? Did they count the cost of waterproof labels because they've got a perishable product that has to stay cold? And did they count the cost of gas to get to the market to sell it? So a lot of folks come into these very small businesses that they're very passionate about and don't have the business background to know that if you're going to hire an employee, you're going to need to have workers' compensation insurance. And that's what we try and do, is break it down for them to make sure that as they get into this business, they're not only having fun, but they're creating a financially sustainable business that they can keep going and that can benefit them and their families with a true source of income.
Well, I notice here in New York, in the metropolitan area, we have regular ones down in Union Square in New York with the same people coming week after week, and then we have the pop-up kind. Do you do both, or do you try to concentrate on the ones that are like year-round?
Well, we've got 3 really strong year-round rain or shine markets, and we're lucky in San Diego that our growing season is year-round, and our markets are able to stay really vibrant throughout the year. My company also does some pop-ups, so we'll do a farmer's market and marketplace on the Marine Corps Training Center property once a year called Semper Farm. We do some holiday marketplaces at some of the local shopping areas where if they've got a tree lighting ceremony, or we've got some shopping centers locally that install ice rinks in the winter, and we'll go set up a holiday marketplace around those. So we do a little bit of both.
Dan, back to you.
Thank you. I'm curious about the relationship between you and a vendor. I thought I heard you say that you have certain licenses and permits that you have to get, but the vendor also has licenses and permits that they have to get. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So in California, and this again varies from state to state, but in California, the vendors and or farmers have to have their own set of permits, and depending on what it is that they're selling, they may need permits from the Department of Environmental Health. They may need permits from the Agriculture Department. I also, as an organizer, have to have permits from pretty much every entity that my vendors and farmers have permits from, and a couple more. And I report to all of those folks, the people in the city that are related to risk management, and the Food and Drug Bureau here in California, which is our state version of the FDA, and the California Department of Food and Agriculture. So I, as an organizer, have to have my set of permits. And then each of the vendors that are on the street have to have their set of permits as well. And my responsibility as a manager is to make sure that all of their permits are up to date, not expired, and that they're complying with all the regulations attached to those permits.
So if we look at this as a business, is it, I don't think you try to do it intentionally. It just seems like, as you said, it's easier to run a nuclear power plant than get it set up for a farmer's market. Is there a lot of logistics involved in time-consuming, or once these permits are in place, then you just kind of run with it?
No, because each permit comes with its own set of regulations that has to be monitored as well. So we need to make sure that samples are only exposed for a certain amount of minutes, and then they have to be disposed of, and new samples have to come out. We have to make sure that everybody has a hand washing station on site. We need to look at temperature controls. And we have various inspectors that come out and check these things on a periodic basis, but as managers, we're responsible for checking them every day.
Are you discovering a new trend or something that's unique that you haven't seen before in farmers markets, in your market?
In terms of foodstuffs and things?
Whatever.
So there's a couple of trends. One is that I think farmers markets have truly become a way of life as they've expanded in number over the last 8 to 10 years. So we've got a lot of shoppers that do almost exclusively all of their grocery shopping at farmers markets. So there's more farmers markets now. I think they're stronger. I think that as time has gone on, because they are such a serious part of everyday life, the people that are in farmers markets are realizing that you actually can make a living there, and so you have to treat it more like a business. They're becoming more educated. There are organizations like the Farmers Market Coalition that continue to evolve and have become a force for political input to make sure that the voice of the farmers market, farmers and vendors, is being heard at the legislative level. And then in terms of actual products, I see a lot of cold brewed coffee and a lot of fermented foods right now.
When you say fermented foods, can you give us an example?
Kimchi, kombucha, krauts. There's a beet drink that's fermented that's supposed to do marvelous things for your health. It's funny, though, I actually just moderated a film called Fermented that was made by the same director that did Mind of a Chef on KPBS. And it's amazing what's fermented that we don't think about, because bread, sourdough bread is actually fermented, and salt is fermented, and kimchi and the obvious things are fermented. Beer, of course, a favorite, wine. So there's an awful lot of fermented things out there. But we're seeing coconut milk yogurt that's created by fermenting coconut milk, and just a lot of things in that. I think people are real into the whole probiotic and gut health movement right now.
Right. My wife has become an aficionado of cold brewed coffee. I don't particularly drink coffee, but what's the mystique of cold brewed coffee?
It's a really clear flavor because the coffee isn't heated. The flavorfulness of the beans is not diminished in any way by the heat. You just get a real strong concentration of the coffee flavors. So if you're a real coffee aficionado, and if you really understand the subtle flavors the way people do with beer and cheese and other things, you really taste the difference in the cold brew. And it's easy.
Now,
and they have really cute bottles and labels.
I know. So just Dan, if I could do one more question. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to jump in with a question. Do you provide the stands, or does each person have to supply the stands?
In our case, and every market that I know of in California, and most markets that I know of all over the country, they bring their own tents. So we provide the space. They bring their own setup. There is a beautiful market in Birmingham, Alabama, at Pepper Place, where they provide each stand's tents. They actually come out at 3 o'clock in the morning and they set 100 and some tents up, and then the vendor just shows up and moves into that.
Well, I just realized something. Somebody put it across my computer, but the Mulberry Street Festival in New York City says it is the first farmers market, but that's not the real farmers market in your view, is it?
No, it's not. Yeah, I love the Mulberry Street Festival, and actually there's a huge festival that we do in Little Italy in San Diego, so we've got a little bit of a friendly competition there between us and Mulberry Street. But no, I wouldn't consider Mulberry Street a farmer's market per se. I suppose at some point long ago there could have been farmers involved in that festival. I believe that the first farmer's market in the U.S. may have been in Pennsylvania, the first organized farmer's market. Now, since centuries ago, there's always been a public square in every city where people show up to either sell or barter food. So the first farmer's market actually was probably back in Rome or Greece or those ancient areas. But in the U.S., the first organized farmer's market that I'm aware of was in Pennsylvania.
Dan, it's back to you for the last two questions.
Thank you. I'm curious. I lived in New Jersey for 37 years. We don't have farmers markets after October 1st and don't have them until May 1st. And even down here in Sanibel, we don't have farmers markets after May 1st until October 1st.
Right.
What
I'm
is
real
it like
familiar with the markets in Arizona.
What do they do in California? Do they have markets year-round?
Year-round, yeah, absolutely. We are blessed with a really amazing growing season, and so we have a crazy, wonderful variety of fruits and vegetables throughout the year. Never stop. We don't close for a single weekend. But there are also large markets in Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington, in Washington, D.C., and in New York City that also go year-round. You will see many less green vegetables and tomatoes at those markets during the winter, but you'll see an uptick in root vegetables and squash and pumpkins and that matter cider donuts from the cider mills there. We're seeing some year-round markets even in the colder climates, or in your case, in Phoenix's case, the warmer markets where the season is flipped. And almost everywhere now we're seeing at least one or two year-round markets in most of those areas. Maybe not in Sanibel, but I think Tampa has a year-round market. And some of them are moving inside during their off-season, whether it's too cold or too hot to be outside. And a lot of farmers are developing farming techniques involving hoop houses, so that if it's too cold or it's too hot to farm in your region, you can still keep at least some level of fruits and vegetables going all year.
So do you have a sense of are the number of farmers markets growing in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. The USDA says we're at 8,600 right now, and I think there's some that they have missed just because of the way their system is set up. I'm going to guess that there's probably close to 10,000 right now. The USDA counted, I think, 6,000 2 years ago, and back in the early 2000s, they were only counting 1,200 or 1,400 markets. So, yes, it's grown exponentially in the last 10 years.
So I'm sorry for taking the third question, but it just came to me, Don. If an entrepreneur wants to get involved in this and they don't own a farm, what is a product that they can bring into the markets that they can start a business?
Well, outside the certified farmers market, which is just for farmers, in the case of California, which is highly regulated, and I will tell you that in some parts of the country, certified farmers markets aren't as heavily regulated, so any part of the farmers market. You can still sell jam, you can sell bread, you can sell barbecue sauce, you can sell infused sea salts, you can sell cheese. There's all kinds of things that you can sell at farmers markets outside of farm produce. Once upon a time, certified farmers markets were just farmers, but as they've gotten bigger and more plentiful, and as people have been more interested in where all their food comes from, most farmers markets have expanded to have an adjacent section that is food makers, not necessarily farmers, but people that are making any kind of grocery product.
Right. Thank you. Back to you, Don.
Catt, unfortunately, we have to stop. Your website again for both you and for Intense, please.
Well, for me, you can just go to cattwhite.com, CATTWHITE.com. But find us at Intense Conference. That's INTENTS, intenseconference.com. And any of your aspiring entrepreneurs out there that want to sell at farmers markets, that conference is hugely valuable, and it's great for networking with other farmers and food makers.
Thank you so much. We've been talking with Catt White about farmers markets, which we all attend and we all enjoy. Thank you so much for being with us.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your small business tip of the day. Small business funding is easier these days thanks to a new breed of lender called fintech lenders. These internet-based lenders cut the time between applying for funds and getting the funds to just hours instead of months. They also make it easier to repay your loans, but their costs might be a little higher for their service. The next time you need dollars for your small business, try them. You might like the change. I'm Dan Perkins for Recalculating.biz and your small business tip of the day. Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your featured book. I want to tell you about a recent interview I had with Bob Bethel, a turnaround specialist with lots of success in small business. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. He tells us of his life successes and failures that have made him and his clients so successful. Over the years, Bob has brought 77 companies back from the brink and changed them into thriving, profitable businesses. His energy is amazing, and at 74, he proves that you can still have a great deal to give others if you just try. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there, is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book.
Welcome back to Recalculating, the program dedicated to American small business. Now it's time to bring together our two experts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella, as they discuss things that are happening now that are affecting your business success.
Nationwide Insurance reported on a recent survey of companies with 1 to 299 employees. It found that cyber criminals are not just after large corporations on Wall Street. They're increasingly targeting small to mid-sized companies on Main Street, and business owners are not prepared for it. In fact, 45% of respondents had been a victim of cyber attack and had not recognized there was an attack during that time. Here to tell us about this and more is Karen Johnston, Nationwide's casualty technical consultant with the commercial staff Underwriting Group. Boy, that's a big title, Karen. But from what I heard, you're a big girl to carry it through. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about the survey, and what small businesses should be doing.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me today. As you mentioned, I work in Nationwide's commercial staff underwriting area, and I'm a technical consultant for casualty coverages. And one of my responsibilities is cyber insurance and making sure everyone understands it, why we need it, how to underwrite it, and all that good stuff. So as you also mentioned, we published a survey this fall. It was actually our third annual cyber survey of small business owners. And the survey indicates that while small business owners realize it's important to establish cybersecurity best practices, many are not doing this. I'll give you a few examples of what we learned from the survey. 85% believe it's important to secure their networks, but only 58% are actually doing this. 80% said they should require employees to use strong passwords and to change them often, but only 52% actually have this requirement. And 85% said they realize it's important to protect against viruses, spyware, and other malicious code. However, only 65% have actually implemented this type of protection. And, you know, this is not surprising considering that small business owners wear many hats. You know, we're lucky here at Nationwide. We have a very large IT department that keeps us up and running. But small business owners don't have a separate IT department. They are the IT department. So our main reason for commissioning this survey was to determine how we can best serve our policyholders. And so obviously they need some assistance in cyber protection. So besides the actual insurance coverage that we provide, we can help small business owners implement cybersecurity best practices. As an example, all Nationwide policyholders, actually regardless of if they purchase cyber coverage, can obtain a discount from Norton Small Business Online Security. So they receive a 20 to 30% discount on something that they really should be purchasing anyway to help protect their computer systems. And for those that purchase cyber insurance coverage from Nationwide, we offer a dedicated website that can assist them with education for their employees on a variety of topics such as privacy awareness, how to avoid phishing emails. We have resources on how to better protect sensitive information. Let's see, we have a template they can personalize that will become their roadmap if they suspect a cyber breach. You know, what is the next step if we think someone's accessed our system. We also give them access to third-party experts that they can engage for cyber risk assessments, additional employee training, forensics, and legal guidance. And then also a huge benefit.
Karen, before you go any further, tell our audience the website.
Oh, okay. Well, if you go to nationwide.com, you can search for the cyber survey. If you put cyber survey in the search button, which is at the very top right. And then also we have a mylosscontrolservices.com that they can access that will provide them additional information.
Will you spell that out for our audience?
Sure. It's My Loss Control Services, so it's MyLossControlServices.com.
Well, a link to that one will be on our website tonight after this program. But before you go any further, Karen, because you have a lot of information, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and perhaps and he can lead us into some other areas.
Sure.
Thank you for joining us, Karen. The first question I would ask you, in all of the survey results that you gave us a few moments ago, how do small businesses compare in terms of execution to medium and large-sized corporations?
Well, we find that small businesses have fewer resources and dedicated dollars to go towards IT support, much less than your, medium to large-size companies. And so that really creates some vulnerabilities in their computer systems. And cyber criminals don't necessarily target the large corporations. What they're really looking for is weak security, websites and computer systems that are easy for them to access and get in and get information. And I think it's a misconception that small business owners think that they don't have information that cyber criminals want. But, they accept credit card payments. They collect and maintain personal information on their employees and their customers. They have a website. They do online banking. So all of these activities create opportunities for cyber criminals to obtain the type of information they're looking for.
Karen, when you think about Nationwide Insurance being a very diverse company, it needs to, in its life or health or other divisions, it needs to assess the risk in determining a premium for a particular policyholder. Do you assess the risk, or do you just offer a flat rate policy?
We do assess the risk. Although I will say that obtaining cyber insurance coverage is much, much easier than it used to be. Many, many years ago, it used to be, like almost a 10-page application that only your IT support person could complete. And nowadays, it's really just kind of whittled down to 10 questions, just making sure that you have the minimum level of security in place. And
what would be, in your mind, for a small business, what would you qualify as a minimum level of protection?
It would be someone that requires each employee to have a unique password, and those passwords be changed on a regular basis. We like to see businesses that have antivirus software. Not only do they have it installed, but they take the regular updates to make sure it's most current.
And so that these are basic things that a small business should have, perhaps even if they don't have cyber insurance, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But these are steps, these are tips that you're giving people listening to the program today of some basic rudimentary things that they need to do to at least have some base level of cybersecurity.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I have additional tips if you want to spend some time there as well.
Are they on the website?
Yes, the majority of them are.
And it would be the same place where you told us to go before?
Yes, we include a lot of tips in our cyber survey results. So if you search for that on nationwide.com, you'll have a list of those.
Okay. So if we think about your protection, so I buy I'm considering buying a cybersecurity policy from Nationwide. Are there different levels of policies that I can buy?
Yes. There are two different coverages. One is the data breach coverage. So if your computer system is hacked and you lose personally identifiable information of your employees and your customers, this insurance will pay for the cost of you to comply with breach notification laws, which includes having to send out notification to the affected individuals. The majority of states require you to offer them credit monitoring services. So this coverage is going to pay for all of those expenses, and it'll guide you through what you need to do to make sure that you're staying in compliance with the various state laws.
And is there a deductible generally?
Yes, there is a deductible, and it varies. The higher deductible that you select, typically the lower the premium. And then the higher the limit you want, the higher the premium. So sometimes it's a balancing act to determine, what you're most comfortable with purchasing.
Okay. So if I look at, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, you finish.
Okay, and then the other coverage is the Cyber One coverage protection, which is going to protect your business against damage to electronic data and computer systems from virus or other computer attacks. So it protects your system, the cost to restore it back to what it was before the attack, and then it also protects the business's liability to third parties that may have suffered damage due to weak security in the business's computer system. So if your business inadvertently transmitted a virus to another company, took out their website, and they lost revenue for a few days because they couldn't take online orders, covers your liability in that situation.
So let me go back and take a look at this one more time in a different way. According to Don, your survey businesses from 1 employee to 299 employees. So in the real sweet spot of small business in America today, that's a huge number of businesses. What is it that makes a small mom and pop with maybe 5 to 10 employees or less? What makes them so enticing to hackers?
A weak security. Like I mentioned before, they don't have the dollars or expertise to invest in protecting their system. So they're really just an easy target.
And I understand that, but what makes those small businesses desirable targets for the hackers? I understand it may be easier to get in than a big corporation, but
oh, sure.
What makes them attractive that the hacker would want to spend the time with a small mom and pop?
Okay, sure. Well, the types of information that hackers are looking for include what is referred to as personally identifiable information, or PII. And what that is it's, information in combination, such as my name and my social security number and my address. So those items in combination, if a hacker could obtain that information about me, they could open credit in my name. They're also looking for credit card numbers, for instance. Even a very small mom and pop shop collects this information, first of all, on their employees. They have that information, name, address, social security number. Even a lot of small businesses take online credit card payments or just credit card payments in general at their store. So they're collecting this information, and that's what, the hackers are looking for. So, while they're going to get a lot more information from a much larger corporation, that's going to take a lot more time for them to get into their system. But, if they could knock off, 20 small mom and pop shops, get, smaller amounts of information, but nonetheless it takes them a lot less time than it would a large corporation that's investing a lot of money in their computer system protection.
Right. So I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to try and ask it in such a way as not to implicate any particular organization.
Okay.
But I want to use as an example. And I've got to disclose to you up front, I'm a registered investment advisor. I've been managing money for over 40 years, and all of my accounts are what they are called discretionary accounts, which means I have the ability to buy and sell, but I cannot remove funds. Now, with that, there are some organizations who are advertising on the radio that cyber attacks can steal your 401k money. And every brokerage firm that I work with that has one of my clients' 401k programs, the ability for anybody to get into the file without recorded messages and forms that have to be signed and certified, I have grave concerns that they're being misleading to the American public, that their retirement accounts are in jeopardy. And so have you ever had a sense of that you've had a claim where somebody lost money stolen out of their 401k?
We have not. Not that I'm aware of, no.
Do you offer protection for that?
Well, I don't believe that it would be excluded from our coverage form if it was an investment advisor that had that information.
No, I'm not.
Someone could access it through.
Let me qualify that. They're not saying that people like myself who have limited access to the accounts, they're not saying that at all. They're just saying that your bank account and your 401k can be hacked. And I'm trying to figure out, with all the security that I see on Wall Street, how a 401k can be hacked. I'm not saying it's not possible. I just have never run across anybody who's ever told me, or I've not seen any reports where a 401k. And the reason why I'm asking the question, it's important. I think that Karen, when we talk about services, whether it be protection, no matter what it is, that we have a responsibility to be fair and honest with the customer. And I think that what you've already demonstrated, that Nationwide, it's not because I had a long relationship with them. You answered all the questions up front, and you talked about the underwriting processes and the questions that people have to ask and the risks that people might be taking. But I suspect that there are some people who are in this business who are, let's say, misleading consumers as to how much exposure some of their money might have. And I think it's a fear tactic, which I think has people making decisions based on fear that perhaps they shouldn't. I'm saying they don't need security, but I'm saying to attach it to their. I mean, they don't say anything about your IRA or your pension plan. They just specifically went after 401ks, and so I think that's somewhat misleading. So that it's interesting in the statistics of people who said they believed they should do something versus those people who actually did something. Now, if I remember the numbers from Don, in almost every category, everybody had compliance of about 60% or higher, but they had a realization of 80 to 85% that they needed to do something. Is it a matter of human resources, financial resources? Why the huge disparity between understanding the need and implementing the need?
I think it's a combination of things. I think it's financial resources. I think it's, people resources. And I also just think it's probably one of those things that's, in their mind as important, but, in their prioritization of things, it's not at the top of the list. They have a business to run, and they're going to, do things that are going to keep that going. And this is, probably something on their list they need to do, but it just hasn't gotten to the priority of actually getting it done.
Okay, Don?
This is Don Mazzella, Karen. We have just a couple of minutes left. My question, we're talking with Karen Johnston. She's a security expert for Nationwide Insurance. But my question is, how did you get into this field and get your expertise?
Well, I have been with Nationwide nearly 4 years, but before that I worked for another insurance company in a similar role, and I actually was responsible for developing their cyber insurance program. So, it took a long time and a lot of learning, and, I read everything that I can about the subject. It's just, something that I've really become passionate about. I'm fearful for small business owners. I think that, it's kind of a disservice that the only breaches that you hear about are, headlined as in large companies being breached. But as I mentioned before, the small business owner is an easy target. So we're doing all that we can to educate them to this need and, giving them the supporting services to help get them to where they need to be.
Tell us your websites again.
Nationwide.com and mylosscontrolservices.com. And as I mentioned before, we do have a lot of information. If you do a search for cyber survey, our surveys for the last 3 years will come up, and there's links to other resources there. And as we mentioned, things that the small business owner can do to protect themselves.
Karen, it's really been a great pleasure having you and very informative. Dan, do you want to add anything?
I just thought it was. I thank you for your honesty and your candor. Sometimes my questions aren't the easiest to answer, and I appreciate your being with us today. And we'll look forward to your next survey. Thanks for joining us.
Great, thanks.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, if you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.